The courtroom was silent, frozen mid-breath, as Representative Jasmine Crockett slowly raised a single sheet of paper into the air. Judge Byron Clay's voice had just thundered through the chamber, ordering her silenced, struck from the record. But Jasmine didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly unfolded the document with his signature on it. Proof of a secret meeting, a buried scandal, and a manipulated verdict. The judge's face drained of color. The gallery gasped. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The gavel drops, but not for justice. The morning sun glinted off the stone columns of the federal courthouse in Dallas as Representative Jasmine Crockett stepped inside. Dressed sharply in a navy suit, she exuded calm, but inside her nerves were coiled tight. She wasn't here as a politician today. She was here as a witness in a civil rights case, one she believed was deliberately being sabotaged from within the system. Presiding over the case was Judge Byron Clay, an aging, stern-faced conservative jurist known for his tight grip on decorum and disdain for what he called public theatrics. His courtroom was his kingdom, and he ran it like an old Southern fiefdom. Few dared to challenge him. Jasmine knew this. But she also knew something else. He had a pattern, a disturbing one. And today, she was ready. Within the first hour of proceedings, Judge Clay interrupted Jasmine 5 times. He cut off her answers, struck her remarks from the record, and warned her counsel to remind the witness of her place. The air thickened with tension. The audience, mostly journalists and activists, murmured uncomfortably. Everyone saw it. Everyone felt it. Still, Jasmine remained composed. Her motivation wasn't fame. It wasn't even revenge. It was justice. For the young black man whose rights had been violated, for his grieving mother in the back row, and for every voice silenced by procedural tyranny. Then it happened. Clay interrupted again, this time mid-sentence, and ordered, "That's enough, Miss Crockett. You're out of order and off topic. One more disruption and you'll be removed." Gasps echoed. Cameras clicked. Jasmine slowly reached into her briefcase. The room froze. She laid one crisp document on the podium. "Then this should interest the court, Your Honor," she said, her voice smooth but steady. "It's your signature, on an order, dismissing a civil case, after a private lunch with the defendant's counsel, 1 week before your recusal." For a second, Judge Clay didn't move. Then the explosion came, not from him, but the gallery. Audible gasps. A few people stood. Reporters scrambled. The bailiff stepped forward, unsure of what was about to happen. Jasmine just stared ahead. Years of silence were cracking, and she had only just begun. The smear machine awakens. The next morning didn't come softly. Jasmine Crockett's phone began vibrating before the sun cracked over the skyline. Not a call. Dozens of notifications. She didn't even lift her head at first, still wrapped in the lingering heat of the previous day's adrenaline. Her body ached. Her mind throbbed with fatigue. But her instincts stirred, prickly and alert. When she finally opened her eyes and saw the screen, the knot in her stomach returned instantly. She was trending, not for bravery, not for justice, but for contempt. A conservative commentator had clipped a distorted version of her exchange with Judge Clay. The framing? "Unhinged Congresswoman disrespects honorable judge in fit of rage." It had already been reposted by a dozen right-wing pages. Within hours, the clip hit primetime TV. The titles were nearly identical across outlets, suspiciously so. She should be investigated. She embarrassed herself and the court. Jasmine Crockett has no place in Congress, let alone a courtroom. Hashtags exploded. #Crockett meltdown. #unfit to serve. But that was only the surface. Beneath it, something colder moved, more calculating. Not an organic backlash, but a campaign, a machine. Within 24 hours, bots flooded Twitter with low-res memes painting her as a radical. Facebook pages shared deep-fake videos that subtly warped her facial expressions to appear erratic. Her Wikipedia page was edited repeatedly, flagged for behavior unbecoming a public servant. And then came the whisper networks, the kind that didn't operate on hashtags. An anonymous blog surfaced, alleging that Jasmine had once falsified evidence during a state trial. The claim was false, easily disprovable, but that didn't matter. Screenshots spread faster than corrections. Then the ethics complaint hit, filed late in the evening by a group calling itself Citizens for Judicial Respect. The document accused her of witness intimidation, courtroom disruption, and reckless defamation. The complaint cited no legal precedent, no evidence. It even spelled her name wrong in 2 places. But it didn't need credibility. It just needed airtime. By the second day, her own party began to recoil. Whispers floated through Capitol corridors like cigarette smoke in an old speakeasy. She's dangerous. She's dragging us into her mess. She needs to step back, for optics at least. The betrayal stung more than the lies. Colleagues she'd fought beside for voting rights and housing reform suddenly fell silent. Emails went unanswered. Interview offers dried up. One longtime aide quietly suggested a public recentering strategy, a PR term for apology without admission. Jasmine declined. Instead, she turned inward. Her team, a skeleton crew of loyal staffers, mostly black women who'd weathered storms beside her, started noticing strange patterns. Cease and desist letters from firms with no listed clients, threats to her family's business. Even her bank account was flagged for an automatic compliance audit. And then came the IRS letter. Random, of course. Routine review, it said. But Jasmine knew better. She wasn't being criticized. She was being erased. One night, long past midnight, she sat alone in her office. The city blinked dully outside her window, cars moving like blood cells through arteries of steel. Her laptop screen glowed with headlines. Congresswoman Crockett crosses the line. Contempt charges likely, sources say. Was it all a stunt? She stared at them for a long time, not blinking, not moving. She thought about Eric Talley's mother, about the judge's smirk, about the way her voice had echoed in that courtroom, so clear, so sharp, and how it was now being dragged through mud by people who had never known what it cost to speak plainly. And in that moment, doubt seeped in. Was it worth it? Her reputation, her seat, her life's work, shattered not by a fair fight, but by a system more skilled at self-preservation than justice. Maybe she had overplayed her hand. Maybe she had given them exactly what they needed. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. Buzzed again. Still nothing. Then a third time. She glanced down, eyes sluggish. Unknown number. One message. No introduction. Just a line. You're right. He's done worse. I'll talk. Jasmine blinked. Read it again. The area code was local. Burned into her memory. 214. Dallas. The message came from someone inside. Someone who had seen things. Someone who had been quiet, until now. She sat up straighter. For the first time in days, her breath slowed. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Instead, she opened a fresh legal pad and wrote 3 words in black ink. They messed up. And with that, the tide, which had nearly drowned her, shifted. Not yet visibly. Not publicly. But beneath the surface, a crack had opened in the machine, and something was leaking through. The document that broke the bench, Jasmine. Crockett had learned that revolutions rarely begin with thunder. They begin with murmurs, quiet voices choosing for the first time not to stay silent. In the days following her public confrontation with Judge Byron Clay, those whispers turned into signals. First came a young court clerk from Galveston, then a paralegal from Clay's own chambers, a retired bailiff from El Paso. All different cities, all separate stories. But they shared one thing in common. They had seen what Jasmine had dared to name. Evidence ignored. Witnesses barred. Verdicts issued with breathtaking speed after private meetings. A system so casual in its corruption that no one had ever expected it to be challenged. But Jasmine wasn't there to speculate. She needed more than testimony. She needed evidence. It arrived, as these things often do, without fanfare. A small padded envelope, no return address. Inside, a USB drive. No note, no label, just a name written in thick marker, October 12th, 2021. The recording was rough, but unmistakable. A closed-door finance meeting at the courthouse. Judge Byron Clay's voice, clear as day. "We can't afford another public mess. That verdict makes the city look negligent. Let's angle it toward dismissal, quietly." There was no outrage in his tone, no fear, just bureaucracy dressed as law. Jasmine listened in silence. Then she played it again and again. They ran voice print forensics, matched timestamps, verified attendees, everything checked out. With her legal team, Jasmine assembled a motion for emergency judicial inquiry. It was meticulous. 57 pages of corroborating affidavits, verified timelines, and internal memos. Attached was the full transcript of the recording, notarized and chain of custody certified. But she didn't stop there. She released the transcript, quietly but strategically, to 3 media outlets from across the political spectrum. By sunrise, the story had detonated across the nation. Federal judge caught steering verdicts in private meeting. Jasmine Crockett's claims confirmed by bombshell audio. Judicial integrity crisis, law under the microscope in Texas. News anchors called it the biggest judicial scandal in a generation. Editorial boards issued apologies for previously doubting her. Activists rallied outside courthouses, and Congress, once mute, demanded answers. Judge Clay emerged on the steps of the courthouse, flanked by 2 high-profile attorneys. He denied everything, called it a manufactured hit job, and smirked when he said, "This witch hunt ends today." But his smirk didn't land, because hours later, Jasmine went live. In a somber, televised deposition streamed across every major platform, she read directly from Clay's financial logs and internal memos. June 3, 2020. Lunch with attorneys Holtz, Darbin, and Keene. Total billed to judicial outreach, $428. June 10th. All 3 attorneys appear before Judge Clay. All 3 receive favorable rulings. There were no flourishes, no raised voice, just cold, devastating facts, and the effect was seismic. By evening, the Texas Judicial Ethics Board issued a 1-line statement. Effective immediately, Judge Byron Clay is suspended from his duties pending full investigation. No court proceeding, no argument. He was gone. And with him, the myth of untouchable justice began to collapse. When truth becomes fire. 3 weeks had passed. 3 weeks since the courtroom had gone quiet. 3 weeks since Judge Byron Clay had been suspended, since the ethics board stopped pretending, and since Jasmine Crockett had returned home to a mailbox filled with hate and hope. And now, she stood once again outside the courthouse where it had all begun. This time, not as a silenced witness, not as an isolated target, but as the woman who lit the match. The crowd had been gathering since dawn. There were no invitations, no permits, just people, drawn by something that felt too urgent to ignore. Law students with protest signs scribbled in red Sharpie, young activists with notebooks and live streams, a grandmother in a church hat holding her granddaughter's hand, whispering. She stood up. You watch her now. Journalists were present too, but for once, they weren't leading the conversation. They were observing it. By the time Jasmine stepped up to the podium, silence had already fallen, not from command, but reverence. She didn't carry notes. She didn't need to. Her words had been earned, not scripted. 3 weeks ago, I stood in this building and was told I was out of order, she began. That I had spoken too long, too boldly, too truthfully. But what they didn't understand is this: justice isn't quiet. Justice interrupts. She paused, letting that settle. I was called reckless, disrespectful, a threat to order. But if the order you protect is built on silence, then it deserves to fall. A woman in the crowd wiped her eyes. A man near the steps nodded, arms folded, jaw clenched. The sound of traffic a block away seemed to fade, as if even the city was listening. Judge Clay is gone, but I didn't come here to celebrate that. Because this was never about one man. It was about a system that protected him for decades. Because no one wanted to believe someone in a robe could be corrupt. But here's the truth. Corruption doesn't always look like a crime. Sometimes it looks like protocol, procedure, a shrug, a closed door. Another pause. Then she leaned forward, eyes focused like a scalpel. To every court clerk who was told to delete a file. To every assistant who saw a redacted name and knew it wasn't right. To every intern who typed what they were told instead of what they saw. You were never crazy. You were never alone. And to those who say, you could have handled this quieter. Let me ask you, when has quiet ever changed anything? The wind stirred. Phones captured every syllable. Justice isn't served by silence. It's earned by risking everything for the truth. That was the line. The one that would echo far beyond Dallas. That night, her speech was shared millions of times. In classrooms, teachers played it. In community centers, organizers looped it on old projectors. In churches, pastors quoted her. In courts, young attorneys whispered it under their breath as they faced skeptical judges and stacked odds. And what followed wasn't chaos. It was motion. In the days that followed, the National Judicial Oversight Initiative reported a 400% increase in misconduct tips. 3 other judges were placed under review. Dozens of court employees submitted affidavits to local DAs, emboldened by the storm Jasmine had survived and led. A bill was introduced in the House, one aimed at protecting judicial whistleblowers, mandating case transparency, and limiting lifetime appointments to federal benches. Its informal name? The Crockett Clause. And Jasmine? She didn't start a nonprofit. She didn't take a sabbatical. She didn't write a memoir, though offers flooded in. She went back to work, back to writing legislation, back to listening to constituents, back to fighting for housing reform, prison oversight, and fair trials. Because for her, this moment wasn't an ending. It was proof that you could speak, that you could survive, that you could win without compromise, and most importantly, that truth, once spoken, doesn't go away. It spreads like fire.